All right. This is so amazing. So I was reflecting that 15 months ago, the PSC team was sitting with the APPA team in January at the Pet Summit, or Pet Leadership Summit in San Diego, and we came up with this idea to have the event here. And it's been 15 months of work and effort, sweat, tears, love, and it's just awesome to see everybody sitting in this room. So if I haven't met you yet, my name is Jim Lamancusa. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of the Pet Sustainability Coalition. It's an honor to welcome you all to Impact Unleashed, a gathering of hearts, minds, and businesses dedicated to shaping a better future. Over the next 2 days, we'll explore sustainability, not just as an idea, not just as a hope or a dream, but as real, tangible action to shape a better future. And it will require all of us together to turn aspiration into action. I know that many of you have arrived here today because you want to see the world a better place. Whether you're leading sustainability efforts at your company, looking for a new or innovative solution, or just getting started on your business, your journey, you're here because you care. And that gives me hope. Because at a time when the challenges that we face can seem overwhelming, hope isn't just a feeling, it's a responsibility. To that point, I'd like to share 3 thoughts that will guide the next 2 days and hopefully beyond. The first thought, control what you can. The reality is we're living in a time of complex environmental and social issues. Climate change, resource scarcity, waste management, ethical sourcing. These aren't just buzzwords. These are real, tangible challenges that are affecting our businesses, our community, and the planet that we all share. But here's the key. We have to focus on what we can control. It's easy to get caught in the spiral of fear, doom scrolling through headlines, feeling paralyzed by the enormity of the problems that we face. But fear has never solved a problem. Fear has never innovated a new solution, and fear has never built a sustainable business. Instead, progress happens when we shift our mindsets from fear into action, from frustration into optimism. One of my favorite examples of this comes from a company that many of you know well, Patagonia. Yvon Chouinard, its founder, didn't sit around waiting for environmental changes to happen. He didn't wait for policies to change. He didn't wait for consumers to demand better products. He focused on what he could control, his supply chain, his own business practices, and his messages to his consumers. Today, Patagonia is a global leader in sustainable business. And it's not because they had the perfect roadmap. In fact, there was a lot of stumbling and challenges along the way. But they focused on what was within their power to change. And guess what? That focus rippled outward, inspiring other businesses, suppliers, and even consumers to demand better. So let me ask you, what do you control? You control the products that you design. You control the people that you hire. You control the development and the growth of those people. You control the suppliers that you work with. You control the ingredients and the packaging that you choose. You control the partnerships you build, and you control the stories that you tell. When we each take responsibility for the things that are within our reach, the ripple effect becomes unstoppable. My second thought, collaboration is our superpower. So here's the truth, none of us can do this alone. No company, no government, no nonprofit, no individual can tackle these issues alone. We need each other. So my second story, 13 years ago, this crazy guy named Chris Bentley sat with Auden Schindler, who was the vice president of sustainability for the Aspen Ski Co. See, Auden had recently seen the success of the Outdoor Industry Association in bringing together companies to leverage their resources and solve issues that were too large for any one company to do on their own. So Auden told Chris, you should do the same thing for the pet industry. Chris rose to the challenge. He moved his family, uprooted, came to Boulder, and started making phone calls. Quickly, he found a young, energetic, and extremely intelligent woman named Caitlin to help turn this dream into a reality. They brought together major competitors in the pet industry, companies that had spent decades battling for market share and dominance, for a groundbreaking initiative. And their goal was to tackle pet industry sustainability, an issue, again, that none of them could solve on their own. Through shared knowledge, innovation, networking, collaboration, we've built something bigger because of our coalition. With over 200 members in 18 countries on 5 continents and a combined annual revenue of $350 billion, the Pet Sustainability Coalition is driving real change. Through an ever-changing landscape of sustainability, we've stayed true to our original mission and vision while continuing to evolve, to serve our members better, the industry, and the planet overall. And we're far from done. This is what happens when you shift your mindset from competition to collaboration. So I implore everyone in this room to let down your competitive walls, share our best ideas. We should continue to view one another not as rivals, but as partners in progress. To that point, I want to do a little exercise. Raise your hands if you've been in the pet industry for more than 30 years. Amazing. Okay, now raise your hand if you've been in the pet industry for more than 20 years. Wow, thank you. Okay, how about more than 15 years? Okay, how about 10? Okay, how about more than 5 years? Okay, now, raise your hand if you've been in the pet industry for less than 2 years. Now, please keep your hands up. Everyone else, please look around the room and make a mental note of these people. I want to ask the rest of you to make a special effort these next 2 days to reach out to these people and show them the warm welcome that only the pet industry can give. From personal experience, I can say it's daunting to come into a new industry, and not all of us are extroverts by nature. So over the next 2 days, I of course want you to connect with old colleagues and friends, but I also ask that you make an effort to meet and welcome newcomers, because I know it's only together and united we can accomplish big things. So to wrap up my second thought, I want to challenge you. Over the next 2 days, don't just network, build alliances. Seek out the people who are working on similar challenges and ask, how can we solve this together? Now, my last point is progress over perfection. Let's be honest, sustainability can feel overwhelming. The challenges are complex, the stakes are high, and the urgency is real. In moments like this, it's easy to fall into the trap of perfectionism, to believe that if we can't do everything, we might as well do nothing, to feel paralyzed by the enormity of the problems that we face rather than empowered at the progress that we can make. But I'm here to tell you that progress over perfection is the key to real and lasting change. Think about where we were just a decade ago. Renewable energy was a niche concept. Companies had little idea how to measure their carbon footprint. Single-use plastics were everywhere with little thought given to the alternatives. And now, solar and wind power are the fastest growing energy sources in the world. Major companies are committed to net zero emissions. People are demanding and getting better, more sustainable products. None of this happened overnight, and none of it was perfect. So there will be setbacks, and we continue to see them today. But every step forward, every imperfect action has brought us closer to a more sustainable world, and we are not giving up. Too often we hesitate to act because we don't have the perfect plan. Businesses hold off sustainability initiatives because they can't yet be carbon neutral. Governments delay or retract their policies because they don't have unanimous support. Individuals don't make changes because they feel like their actions are too small. But waiting for perfection only ensures that nothing ever gets done. We don't need perfect solutions tomorrow. We need forward momentum today. Think about some of the biggest sustainability success stories. The Montreal Protocol, which phased out ozone-depleting substances. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The clean energy revolution wasn't flawless from the start, but it's transforming our energy systems. From 2023 to 2024, we've increased our solar production worldwide by 38% in just a single year. Even small daily actions that you take, reducing food waste, choosing sustainable products, speaking up for change, they move us in the right direction. What if every company here committed to one new sustainable practice in the next month? What if every one of you left this conference with one actionable step? Imagine the impact. Sustainability isn't a finish line that we cross. It's a journey that we're all on together, and there will be setbacks, there will be challenges, but if we focus on progress over perfection, we'll build momentum, we'll inspire others, and we'll create the change that our planet desperately needs. So here we are, 2 days ahead of us, 2 days to connect, to learn, to inspire one another. So I want to leave you with 3 simple but powerful takeaways. Focus on what you can control. Focusing on anything else is a waste of time. Collaborate boldly. The problems that we face are bigger than any one company, but together, we're unstoppable. And progress over perfection. Like one spark can create a huge fire. Every action you take brings us one step closer to where we want to be. We are not here to be passive participants. We are here to unleash impact. And so I challenge each of you, make the most of these next 2 days. Lean in, ask questions, be vulnerable, be bold, because the future is not something that we wait for. It's something that we build. So let's start building. Thank you. So to lay the first foundation stone of the next 2 days, I am honored to introduce our opening keynote speaker. So when you ask somebody what is the most beautiful place they've ever been, and they say the plains of Kenya, you know that you've met one of the most interesting women in the world. Our Monday keynote speaker has been making waves and driving impact across multiple CPG industries for over 20 years. From co-founding Pack Collective, a nonprofit dedicated to getting hard-to-recycle beauty packaging recycled, to pioneering sustainable packaging in several companies, she has spent her entire career shining light on issues that most brands would rather keep in the dark. She's recently brought her skills and experience to the pet industry, and I often joke that she's my first industry buddy because we started in the industry at almost exactly the same time, and we stay closely connected to this day. She was also a surprising star at the Pet Food Forum Axe Throwing Network event last year. It's incredible. I don't know where you get those skills, Mia. Her motivation to do what she does is really simple. She wants the planet to remain habitable for humans, animals, and plants. I think that's a goal that everyone in this room can echo. Speaking of animals, her home is basically a mini sanctuary. Ona, the world's best mixed breed pup who loves everyone but is deeply suspicious of the wind, to Pip, a dapper-looking cat who acts like a total goofball, to Seven, a sweet feline with a few extra toes and a lot of extra charm. Oh, and sustainability pro tip. Almost any plastic bag that you have can be given a second life as a dog poop bag. So before you throw out that bread bag, consider giving it a second purpose. Please give a warm welcome to Chief Impact Officer from Ollie, Mia Davis.
That was a very generous introduction. Well, that was not only a gracious introduction for me personally, but a really nice setup for this next 2 days, and for my presentation too, because perfection is the enemy of progress is a major theme that I'll be talking about in my presentation, called Driving True Impact: Strategies for New Programs. So as Jim said before I get started, I just want to do one more little blip about myself. I am new to this space. I'm one of the people who had my hand raised and who you're supposed to court and make me feel welcome, and I would love that because I do still feel like a newbie, especially when I saw the hands of 30 and 20 years veterans in this space. But there are so many similarities between sustainability and impact in consumer packaged goods like beauty, personal care products, intimate care products, supplements, and packaging. And a lot of these spaces, I would argue, are under-regulated and have a lot of opacity. So that's also a common theme between them. But I am new to the space, and I welcome your tutelage. So here's the outline for today. We're going to be talking about what is impact really? How do I define impact so that we're on the same page? How we drive impact, so opportunities for your business, and how you prioritize, measure, and report. I'm going to do this risky thing where I try to take this off. Yeah, that's better. And then some examples from Ollie and other brands around responsible sourcing, packaging and waste reduction, partnerships, and talking about impact, otherwise known as communications, PR, education. And then hopefully we'll have time for a few questions at the end. So defining impact, what is it anyway? There is no one right way to define it. There's certainly no agreed upon definition for our industry, and it changes with companies and with other industries and across time. But this is how I think of it, impact kind of in the middle of this multiple Venn diagram, these different orbs. And you can substitute some of these words out, so don't get too married or attached to any of them. But I'll briefly define each of these for me and for Ollie, and perhaps it'll resonate for you and your business, no matter where you are in the supply chain. So sustainability is meeting the current needs without compromising the needs of the future. And in business, I think about this as striving for growth that doesn't preclude others from also growing later, right? It's kind of that seventh generation concept. Animal welfare, the animals in the supply chain and in feeding trials should have the 5 basic freedoms, which include but are not limited to freedom from hunger, thirst, pain, injury, or fear, and the ability to actually act like an animal. Education and advocacy is really offering thorough and accurate information, so not cherry picking facts, using real data, real facts, telling even inconvenient truths to customers, business partners, and other members of the supply chain, other stakeholders. And advocating, which is related, I think, is when we use our business voice to speak up to advocate for populations that are affected by or concerned with the products that we make or the industries that we act in. So already you might be thinking, my business is not really leading or very invested in advocating. And that might be true. So for this orb might be much smaller for your impact, right? At Beauty Counter, where I was one of the first hires, we had a really strong advocacy component where we lobbied for change and said the beauty industry, personal care products and cosmetics are too underregulated. Regulate us. That will actually help us to make safer products and drive innovation. So that was actually a real winner, sticking our neck out and investing in education and advocacy. Partnerships, I think it's, Jim already really highlighted this. We don't have to spend much time on it. It really is about partnering in order to lift all boats, not just in the business, but with academic institutions, nonprofit organizations, other members of the value chain that might have less of a fiscal presence in our industry. But I think notably, I want to say that partnerships is not about greenwashing. So it's not like, oh, I partnered for a month with someone in this organization, and now I can really capitalize on that for the rest of the year. I think of this as a very meaningful undertaking and investment. And social responsibility, otherwise known as corporate social responsibility. You could fit ESG in here, although ESG could fit in other places. This refers to practices that positively impact society beyond just economics, right? So fair wages, supplier codes of conduct. And again, if you've been doing this work, you know that these things are connected, and you might call it something different. And when you pull one thread, you might find that they're attached to another. So why does impact matter? Jim also touched on this, but before I give you a couple stats to make sure that we're on the same page, I do want to briefly acknowledge the current landscape 3 full months into 2025, which has already been a hell of a ride. Impact matters quite simply because if we want a livable planet, if we want a habitable planet, we have to start doing things differently. The status quo will not maintain this planet. It will not maintain the supply chains that we depend on, especially animal proteins and fish. And it will not allow for a thriving business. We can't do well and have that top line and bottom line progress if we don't have a healthy ecosystem. The lack of a healthy ecosystem is the lack of a healthy economy, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So just, a couple of depressing statistics for you to make sure that we're all on the same page. Up to half of the plant and animal species in the world's most naturally rich areas could face extinction by the end of the century. And this is primarily due to deforestation, habitat loss, and climate change. Humans produce about 400 million tons of plastic waste every year, much of which is packaging that is not recyclable, despite the Mobius loop symbol that is on those packages. This is toxic and terrible for humans, the ecosystem, communities that have to deal with the waste of the primarily plastic packaging. And that figure, 400 million tons, is so hard to wrap our heads around. And this may or may not help because this is also crazy, but that's more than 1,000 Empire State Buildings. So just like that much plastic packaging waste. And 33% of the Earth's soils are already degraded. At the current rate of soil degradation, the world could run out of topsoil in 60 years. So again, 60 years is not that long. And a lot of us have business longevity goals. Maybe we won't be doing the work in 60 years, but we want our businesses to be thriving in 60 years. And this matters specifically to us because some of this work is becoming table stakes in other industries, and I think we need to catch up. And I say that with all due respect, having just said I just got here a year ago to this industry, and there's a lot of people in the room that have been driving this really hard. But if we look across the industry as a whole, I think we have a lot of work to do. And research shows that sustainability and impact lead to conversion and retention. If you haven't seen the Nielsen studies, McKinsey studies, Forbes just had a piece on this. There's plenty of data that we can go through and grab to underscore the foundation for impact and sustainability work in your brand. And I already said, I really feel strongly that we can't afford to maintain the status quo. So I've now sprinkled in some Ollie, dogs of Ollie, because that's fun. So this is one of my colleagues' dogs, Bandit. And I'm going to briefly talk about take, make, waste. Have you guys heard of this phrase in the linear economy? Take, make, waste. So this, I'm going to stay here for a second. So the linear take, make, waste economy goes something like this. Resources are extracted to make products or packaging, many of which consumers use for minutes or even seconds, and then are thrown away. So just away, we don't have to think about it, it goes away. Products and materials are generally not used to their full potential, so they're not fully valued, especially when you think of the cost of extracting those materials from the earth, most of which come from oil or gas, right? And then are refined petrochemicals. And I think it's really crucial that we remember there's no such thing as a free lunch, a phrase that you probably heard in economics way back when. Milton Friedman was, the quote is attributed to Milton Friedman, who I always want to say Morgan Freeman, but I did it okay this time. I said Milton Friedman. You can tell I'm not an economist. But there is no such thing as a free lunch, and there is no such thing as away. There is no away. We are all connected, and we're seeing this increasingly year after year. You know, when I was growing up, it was still kind of more rare to see plastic waste on the beach. I live by the beach in Massachusetts. And it's everywhere now. I mean, it's everywhere. You can't get away from it. And there are certain communities in the world that are straight up inundated with waste from oil refineries, petrochemical refineries, or plastic waste that came from halfway around the world. We need to do more of true cost accounting. True cost accounting has guided me at Beauty Counter, at Credo, and now at Ollie. And it really helps us to expand our thinking beyond narrow measures of success in a short time frame. So in our industry, we could think of this as, crop yield in one season, and really instead forcing us to think about the true costs and the true benefits of an activity. So this is a bit of an eye chart, and we're not going to get into all of this, but I just wanted to introduce the concept. If it's something that you haven't heard of or you heard about it years ago, it might be a good time to go back and revisit this. True cost accounting is a systematic approach to measure and value environmental, social, health, and economics. So it's not like you're not having a thriving business. It's not like down with capitalism, though we could talk about that over drinks. I think that it's really important to just take these things into account because we want that livable planet and that healthy business and longevity. And you may have heard of the circular economy, right? This is the answer to the linear economy. Instead of take, make, waste, how can we return materials back to nature or back to industry? Circular economy is amazing. I'm a big fan of the circular economy, but we're currently very far from a reality of a circular economy. And I'll be at the Circularity Conference and I'm moderating a panel in late April. So again, big fan of the concept and of the work ahead. But we can't just pretend that recycling is circularity or that one piece of this is circularity. We need to take into account true costs and stop externalizing costs in order to build systems that are more circular. And I would argue we all need to be working on that now. So that's my bit on true cost accounting. All right, so now we'll talk about where we begin. Some of you are old hat and you're not beginning, but perhaps you're thinking about expanding programs, or maybe you're thinking about starting something new, even in a climate that might be less than hospitable. So how might we approach this? Well, it can certainly feel daunting. And my notes say, don't let perfection be the enemy of progress, which Jim already really underscored for us. I completely agree. You need to start where you are, and we need to work together. And thankfully, there are a lot of resources, not just through Pat Sustainability Coalition, though there's so many here and in this room, but there are other resources too. I'll briefly touch on them, and I know some of the other speakers later today will as well. So start where you are, work together. Also, tiny little incremental things, don't give yourself too much credit for them. Like, I don't think changing light bulbs is going to solve the energy crisis. Nobody should be thinking that way. Should you change the light bulb anyway? Absolutely. So what can we do as individuals and businesses to be really honest about the changes that we're making? And sure, talk about them, but let's not conflate small or over credit small actions with big campaigns or marketing. At Beauty Counter and Credo, we built impact into the business from day one. So I was the first hire at Beauty Counter. It was pretty amazing. I got my PhD in startup there. It was a pretty incredible road. By the time I left, we had over 150 people. And then when Beauty Counter unfortunately closed its doors a couple of years ago, though it might come back, it had been valued at $1 billion. And we were the first beauty company that was a beauty unicorn. So it was a really incredible road. And impact was inseparable from the business. And I made Beauty Counter a benefit corporation from day one. It's a lot harder when you work for a company that hasn't been doing that from day one. And Ollie certainly cares and always has cared about sustainability, but sustainability impact partnerships were not core to Ollie from the beginning. So now I find myself kind of having to do what probably a lot of you in this room are doing, where you really need to narrow in, prioritize, and focus because you don't necessarily have that central rallying point. And you're always kind of proving that this is not only the right thing to do and customers want it, but that it will help the bottom line. And I know Joanne from PetSmart's going to be talking about that in depth tomorrow. So here are some ways to prioritize. Obviously, align with your brand mission and values. If those are stated, even if they're like 40 years old, how can you make those gel with sustainability and impact work today? Get some baseline data if you don't have it yet. Greenhouse gas assessments is obviously kind of table stakes right now. I would encourage you to do scope 1 through 3 and do some materiality assessments to really understand what you're working with in the first place. I'll talk about how good briefly on the next slide. Find the low-hanging fruit. So this doesn't mean that it's easy, but is there something that you can do in your supply chain with partners, partner with your own marketing teams to make sure that you're really amplifying the voices of someone else in your network? Those are some examples of low-hanging fruit, and I'll talk about one later too. Use consumer insights. Definitely work with those teams or consultants to hear from the customers and use that to make your case when you are lobbying internally for sustainability and impact, and find opportunities for collaboration. And then get to work. Don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. So learn as you go, measure and report, be ready to pivot, be ready to say, I thought this and it didn't work. Here's the data, and here's why we need to move in this different direction, but here's all that we learned along the way, and good for us for failing forward and not having to make the same mistake twice. And I think publicize those too. And set goals that are attainable. One thing that drives me bananas is goal washing. Goals that are set, especially by large multinational corporations, many of them that are supposed to be happening in 2025, which felt like a long off time like 5 years ago, that there's no way that they're going to be met. That doesn't help any of us. Let's set goals that are actually attainable and that are made public. If they need to be made internally, it's still important to set goals, but all the better if they're public. All right, so now the last part of the presentation where we're going to talk about some examples. So as a reminder, agenda reminder, I'm going to get into 4 quick examples: responsible sourcing, packaging and waste, partnerships, and communicating impact. So this is Sesame, my colleague's dog, so cute. Using data to drive strategy is really important. We can align with existing metrics and methods that our peers are using so that we're speaking the same language. This helps not only in benchmarking our own work, but the customer, when we use the same terms, the customer will start to come along because they will be like, I recognize these terms. I saw this on a salsa brand that I love, or an oat brand, or a beauty company. So using the same language and the same metrics really benefits us all. I know several others will be talking about tools for setting goals and verifying, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the data, but I did want to give a little shout out to How Good and the Lattice platform that Pet Sustainability Coalition is partnering with and really encouraging members to use. So Ollie just signed up with How Good, and I'm really excited to be able to measure and reduce and collaborate and report in a way that is hopefully in line with many of you in the room, again, speaking the common language. So Lattice is the largest product sustainability database. And one thing I'm super excited about using it for is for trade-offs. So when I'm working with the food team and the science team to talk about, okay, if we sourced regenerative chickpeas instead of conventional chickpeas, what does this do to our carbon footprint, so that we have that source of data so that we can be developing, whether it's lower carbon or lower pesticide formulas, and then be able to talk about that credibly. Also want to shoot up here another little eye chart, but I think this is a really interesting data point. So use data like How Good and other, platforms and metrics, but also do your own research and find some good credible sources. This is a snapshot of really important data on food production. Food production is responsible for a quarter of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that even within industries like ours, where we are sourcing agricultural ingredients and proteins, there is some confusion about what is the most sustainable way to go. The type of food, so beef, poultry, vegetables, grains, has the biggest impact. Like, you don't need to go, I'm here to tell you that if you didn't know. So that's helpful to know. That beyond, is it local? How was it grown? What certification does it have? That is the biggest deal. So if you make a product with beef in it, and we do, this is the top graph going vertically across. This is the impact of beef, and these are some of the metrics: land use change, farm, animal feed, processing, transport, retail, packaging. So yes, let's talk about how we raise beef, but let's own the fact that we're using beef. That's the most important thing. Animal products will always produce more greenhouse gas emissions, and there's other obviously animal welfare and human worker issues, community issues around, especially like beef, pork, feedlots. They'll always produce more greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, plant-based agriculture can be 10 to 50 times lower pound for pound. So what you're using is first, and then next is how. So growing practices do matter more than location. Long-term strategy and short-term wins. Regenerative ag is really important, and I'm sure that you have probably heard about it. And if you haven't, I encourage you to get on the train of learning about regenerative ag. And harken back to true cost accounting. Instead of the conventional take, make, waste, this is the crop yield, this is the yield, this is the protein, prices, pound for pound, supply, demand, global dynamics. Think truly about what we're doing to the planet when we are sourcing certain ingredients, period, and then how they are grown and harvested, mined, manufactured, ranched. There's some really incredible leaders in the regenerative ag space, and I won't pretend to be an expert, but there's great podcasts and books, and Bold Return to Giving a Damn is one of my favorite books by Will Harris. If you haven't checked it out, you should. And the audiobook is amazing because his accent and his no bullshit presentation is really great. So regenerative ag, sourcing ingredients with these practices, it's not necessarily as clear-cut as using certifications, so it can be a bit of a rocky road in terms of verification and communication, but this is also a place where we can collaborate. I have some ideas on that around sourcing and CapEx investments that I hope to maybe talk about with you next year or over happy hour. And I wanted to share a short-term win here, because long-term strategy and short-term wins, I talked about the low-hanging fruit. So Ollie currently purchases upcycled sweet potato granules. And our industry is really great at upcycling. We're really good at not wasting a lot of animal or vegetable parts. But we went out of our way to make sure that these sweet potatoes were upcycled. So they were like little ugly bits, right, that weren't going to be used, nothing wrong with them. And we reduced 164,000 equivalent kgs of carbon just from that one switch. And that's a 0.8% reduction in our total greenhouse gas emissions. So we checked this 3 times because I was like, is that real? That number is huge. And that's equivalent to 38 gasoline-powered passenger vehicles driven for 1 year. It's cost parity. It was going to go to landfill or to compost, and we were able to use it and tell the story, of course, and actually lower our carbon footprint. So that's available to you too. That's low-hanging fruit. This is my dog, Una, best dog in the world, who is here to talk to you about material and waste reduction. So the most sustainable packaging is no packaging, right? And from there, it's all about trade-offs. So I always talk about more sustainable packaging or better packaging or using sustainability as a metrics to make choices. Considerations, there are many. They include refill and reuse and aiming for mono-material and recyclable resins, so not fused together mixed materials that have no hope of being recycled, and I mean mechanically recycled. Avoiding the most toxic materials, because talk about circularity, toxics in, toxics out. If we're using toxic stuff, it's not going away. There is no way. It's going to come back in recycled plastic or somewhere else, and it might be in the black spatula that you use in your kitchen, which I wouldn't use anymore. I am a big fan of disclosing materials. If we have nothing to hide, great, tell us what it is. I don't like when suppliers won't disclose materials, and I think thanks to EPR and collective voices asking for more options and disclosure, we're chipping away at this. Less is more. Reduce is the first in the reduce, reuse, recycle on purpose, because for absolutely anything that you think of, most notably packaging, less is always more. I think the pet industry is actually pretty good at that compared to a lot of other industries, so we can pat ourselves on the back for that one. Beauty, whew, rough. Recycled content where appropriate, and responsible sourcing, for example, FSC for paper. In order to work on better packaging and materials, in addition to disclosures and some of the things I mentioned on the previous slide, we need to do an audit. So we need to know what we're using, everything we're using. And, a proprietary blend isn't appropriate anymore. We need to know what all of this stuff is so that we can measure, so that we can manage. You can't possibly manage what you're not measuring. That's a phrase that's often attributed to carbon. It's true for chemicals too, and it's true for packaging. So rethink not only your primary and secondary packaging, but the materials that you're using at your manufacturing sites. Might there be PFAS in some of the cooking material? You're not intentionally adding these persistent bioaccumulative toxic chemicals to your food. You don't want them there, but they could be migrating from the plastic that's used in the cooking process. And I would argue that while everyone in the supply chain needs to own up on that, it's ultimately going to be your responsibility if you're a brand or retailer selling those products and someone gets wind of that. Also happy to talk more about that because I'm not saying everything about that, but it's a big problem in beauty, and I did a lot of research on it there. Rethink materials. So the way that it's always been done isn't the best way. There's still a lot of kind of status quo thinking. We do it this way because it's the way it's been done. And I wanted to talk about a couple of quick wins. So Jim in the intro mentioned that I'm a co-founder of Pack Collective, which is a nonprofit organization that's working with beauty industry stakeholders in a pre-competitive way to really be honest about the packaging we're using and how little of it could ever be recycled. And Pact collects beauty packaging that's clean and empty and could not be otherwise curbside recycled. And we find its highest and best use, so mechanical recycling whenever possible, and waste chemical recycling or waste to energy when it's not possible, so nothing to landfill. We know we're not going to recycle our way out of the problem, but we want to have a way to ameliorate our impact and also get everybody together to actually talk about this inconvenient truth. I think that we should be doing the same in in pet. But at Pact Collective, we were able to collect tons and tons and tons of hard to recycle beauty waste. And some of it we actually were able to turn into pumps for Credo's new eponymous brand. Credo's a beauty retailer, but they do have their own products. And it's like, it shouldn't be rocket science, right? Oh, great, you used recycled content to make pumps. But it's actually really hard. And back to that status quo of like the way things are done. Everyone in the industry, packaging industry, like you can't make recycled pumps. They're too brittle or they won't work, or mixed resins, it's not going to work. Not only did we do it by thinking outside the box and working on it for years, it did take years, but we did it with material actually from the beauty industry. So that's circularity. And I do think it's scalable if there's more participation. And a quick win from Ollie. In August of 2024, so shortly after I joined, we decided to get rid of our feeding guidelines. So Ollie is I should have said this earlier, sorry. Ollie is a fresh frozen human grade pet food brand making dog food, mostly D2C. We are in a couple of retailers, but we had paper feeding guidelines in all of our boxes that we send out to our members so that they could be reminded what the proportions are for their dog to make sure that there's adequate nutrition, right? That was a lot of paper that we were sending out in all of those D2C boxes. So we removed paper and went digital. We have a really great app, truly. It's an awesome user experience, and I'm like a Luddite, so I can say that it's really handy. And now you can get personalized feeding guidelines for your dog just by looking at your phone. And if you want a PDF, you can get it. But we reduced our carbon footprint by 120,000 pounds just from August of 2024 by making this switch. And we've heard nothing but good things from the customer. People were happy about it. And we've also saved approximately the equivalent of 2 acres of forest. All right, last one, talking about impact. That's Hauser. So cute. So tell the customer, this is pretty obvious, but I want to share with you some insights from Ollie about sharing with the customer on packaging when you can. So this is a consumer insight study that we did with Ollie customers and prospects in September. And we found that product packaging statistically leads. This is where customers want to know about the changes that you've made, your commitments to impact. And following packaging, product pages, so PDPs on websites, was the next best way to communicate your impact gains, as well as social media and dedicated landing pages. But of course, tell everyone at different touch points. We have more opportunities to tell our story in different ways. Research shows that products making data-backed sustainability-related claims saw 8% higher cumulative growth over the past 5-year period when compared to products without such claims. So that's one of those McKinsey-Nielsen data points that I mentioned earlier. And, there's a few different ways to do this. We can be working on smarter formulation. So I mentioned using How Good to think about lower carbon recipes. Tell that story. It might be harder to do on pack because it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's a great opportunity for a webinar or a blog or a LinkedIn post. Adding sustainability scores on pack. We can be at the forefront of labeling that shares environmental impact and certifications. Certainly, you've seen this alphabet soup of certifications, especially in other industries, but people really like it. Consumers really feel that you've done your homework and that there's a third party validating your impact work. And impact reporting, so showcasing progress for investors and customers and for your own teams. We know that teams, employees really value this work too. They want to be able to talk about it. They want to be able to see the data and know that we're walking the walk. Oh, last one, partnerships. This is Ryder, such a cutie. I want to give props to the pet food industry for being really good at giving back. This was in the morning keynote too, some examples of this from PetSmart Charities and Petco, Chewy, others. We are good at not wasting food, and I think that's really important, and we should tell that story more and make real commitments, no matter where you are in the value chain, to doing even better, because I know that there's some food waste that is probably underreported. So what if we all made a no food to landfill goal? What if we all collaborated on that and said that we're really committing to that, not just where you sit, but up and down the value chain? According to the EPA, greenhouse gas emissions from landfilled food waste equal the annual emissions of 15 coal-fired power plants. So that's a lot. We can partner to reduce food along the supply chain, not just the end product, especially for those of us that use co-manufacturers. I know we don't like to talk about where food is made in this industry. It's very hush-hush. But if we all are asking about what's happening in manufacturing, I think that we can move the needle there. Pre-competitive collaboration, I won't spend much time here because I think that's kind of the name of the game with this entire day. But Ollie is partnering with some nonprofit organizations in addition to our shelter work that I mentioned on that last slide of 40,000 pounds of food and treats donated. We're partnering with Repurpose Global to remove plastic from the environment. So Ollie does use single-use plastic. It, makes me sad that we do. We're going to reduce that materiality as best we can and make smart choices. But I don't see in the near future that shifting. So I want us to show up and walk the walk to reduce the overall impact of plastic waste in the environment as best we can. And that we're partnering in April to do a cleanup in Colombia with Repurpose Global. And I know they're here. So if you don't know them, they're a wonderful social enterprise and you should, hey Addie, meet them. And then there's other ways that we can collaborate, obviously Pet Sustainability Coalition, but non-industry specific sustainability organizations like Sustainable Brands and How to Recycle, Sustainable Packaging Coalition. And then I added Pack Collective, which I talked about. It's an example from beauty, but we could do something similar. And ZDHC has there was a really great example from fashion. They have, I think it was 3,200 I wrote. 3,200 signatories that are working on this roadmap to zero hazardous chemicals in the fashion and apparel industry, which is really incredible. It's a huge number of companies up and down the supply chain, and they make very complicated, chemically intensive products. So working together is great, and I think that we can do the same. A rising tide lifts all boats. So, Jim, bless you. Jim also asked this question, what will you do to drive impact? And let me ask you the question, when is the best time to plant a tree? You guys know this one? 20 years ago, right? We're late. That sucks. The planet is in trouble. We are where we are. This is the inconvenient truth, and we are where we are. The time is now. Don't let perfection be the enemy of progress, and do your very best to drive change. There is a business case for driving change, so we don't need to feel like this connection is just kind of like this kind of amorphous, energetic, ethical thing, although those are important, I would argue. There is real economic gain here, and it is reducing risk and liability for our businesses and our industry to take action now. So thank you so much. We have time. We have a few minutes for questions, if you have any. Thank you so much. I don't know. I know. That's funny. I don't know. Where are we having drinks?
I was like, I'll take this one. Hi, everybody. The PSC cocktail hour is down the hall where the lunch was today at 6. Great. And we have programming here until then. So
you don't get to leave until then. So anyone? Yeah.
Given what's going on at the federal level, do you see any increased activity that can go forward on our own in some of the nonprofits and the different organizations that you're partnered with?
Yeah. The removal of federal funding from agencies and nonprofit organizations is extremely disturbing and will set this country back. I can't even fathom how many years in terms of research, innovation, and progress. So that's devastating. But I do think that the market, so when I was getting my master's, I felt like there were a couple different ways to go. I could go in public health, I could go in advocacy, I could be a lawyer, I could work on writing laws, or I could go into the market. And I find the market the most interesting sector because we have more ability to pivot. We have consumer loyalty, but we also have a fickle consumer, which I want to work for them. I want to work for their loyalty and attention, and I want them to vote with their dollars. So I really love working on the market side of things for positive impact and for change. So I don't think that's changed. It's really bad not to have federal funding or the support of the federal government on these initiatives, but we can stick up for those nonprofit organizations and those academic institutions and for each other and our own colleagues' work in the space. I think we have an imperative too.
Mia, great talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
On your list of priorities on where to start, you listed white spaces. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can give an example or two.
Yeah, good question. What was I thinking when I wrote white space? Where did I go? Just kidding. No, that's okay. So I think an example of white space is when we see that there's a lot of problems, so there's a lot of opportunities for action. If you see some of your main competitors kind of owning one particular element of it, like maybe it's more responsible protein sourcing, I'm making this up, but we see that there's plenty of room over here in the upcycled category or in a really meaningful cause-based partnership where 1% of sales goes to X organization that is fully aligned with you. I would say that's brand specific and there's white space there. So I think it's coming back to it's all of these things, right? Not in equal measure, but like what are your brand values? Where can you really move the needle? And if moving the needle is also the same space where you're not seeing a lot of your competitors do it and there's more white space, then all the better for you. Yeah. Another one, unless we have a new person. There's someone back there too.
I'm gonna one in the back.
I really appreciate all your advice and everything, but I'm curious, from starting from scratch, and as that sustainability flywheel starts to move quicker and quicker, there's usually a pivotal moment when it starts to really take off. And I'm curious if you can remember or identify what that moment was for Ollie, and what helped spark that acceleration process in the sustainability path for Ollie.
To be totally honest with you, that we're taking off like now or next year. It is still new to Ollie. Ollie's 7 years old and has done some great work internally without leadership. We didn't have a chief impact officer before me or anyone remotely in the same position. So it was just the employees that we have kind of caring enough to ask about certain materials, but not an organized program until last year. So I'm optimistic about what we'll be able to do in the next few years, especially with collaboration.
Sorry, the answer was hiring her.
Yeah.
Flywheel.
Hello. Yeah. So you were showing the impact of the main ingredients, in particular proteins, beef and pork, or lamb. How are you thinking about addressing the impact of those proteins at Ollie? I'm from Instinct. At Instinct, 50% of our carbon footprint is ingredients, is raw materials, and most of it's proteins. Yep. So what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think there's a couple of different ways that we could go about it, and we're just at the beginning, so I don't know yet. But I think that just, again, being honest about the impact and where you might have some wiggle room and where you don't. Like, if because of the cost of beef and because of the growth of the business, if our beef is just, it is what it is, it's locked in, then I'm not going to deny the impact there, nor am I going to continue to push a boulder up a mountain. I'm going to say, okay, what's next? What can I do on poultry? What can I do on salmon? And if that, this kind of goes back to your question too in the back. When I came into Ollie a year ago, we already had contracted proteins and other ingredients for a long way, right? So it's taken me a year to baseline where we're at and to do this auditing, and then to start to see where do we have room for improvement over the next couple of years with different contracts. So I hope it won't appear as scattered, and hope that I'll have the opportunity to tell the story of the holistic approach here in an impact report. But we'll have like regenerative chickpeas and regenerative squash and upcycled sweet potatoes and, MSC certified wild caught salmon. And that's not because we're schizophrenic. It's because we couldn't do all the proteins, both price wise and, opportunity and costs. So I think, taking a look at like maybe a lower carbon recipe. So that could be alternative proteins, but it could also be a blend. It could be lowering the beef and still delivering all the nutrition that you need for the dog or cat or whoever you're serving with some plant protein. Of course, showing efficacy, palatability, all of it, right? We can do that.
I think we have time for one more. No, Chris has one. Chris, you already asked one. So if anyone else has one for Mia.
Thanks, Chris. First, I just want to commend you on your radical honesty, right, of recognizing that we can't be perfect, but still being so damn committed for progress. So thank you. And I'm curious, because you're new to this space, right? We talk about the significance of the movement and how important it is for us all to come together. You talked about how when people start to see the same terms and the same certifications, that we really can influence consumers more together than separately. And I'm curious, in kind of your learning experience as you've come into the pet industry, what are those brands that you're looking up to and watching, the different moves and in the leadership space, specifically in the pet industry? And have you found the industry to be welcoming to you as you have joined?
We could talk about that one over drinks. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, I do feel like it's a little more siloed, like to answer your last question, because I think it's really interesting as sustainability professionals or sustainability curious folks in the room. It's been interesting to move into this space and be talking about this on LinkedIn or just kind of anywhere that isn't pet specific and have people be like, oh, pet. It's like CPG, when you go to circularity or sustainable brands, there's a lot of different industries and I don't see pet there. So I feel like pet hangs out with pet. And then the other sustainability and impact industries seem a little bit more diversified for what it's worth. I would love to see you all in other places. But yes, I feel welcomed. And I think there are some great pioneers in the space. I mean, obviously, most of them are your members, so you know them well too. And Earth Animal is amazing. I definitely look to Earth Animal to say like, what is Steffi and the team doing over there? And that's a great example of collaboration too, right? Like Steffi's been amazing for me, like very pre-competitive. Here are the tools and resources that I've used. Why would I not share these with you? Very, very welcoming and very helpful.